Welcome to the Live to 110 podcast. My name is Wendy Myers, and you can find me on live to110.com. And you can find this video podcast on my YouTube channel, Wendy Live to 110. Today we have James Maskell on the podcast today. His websites are reviveprimarycare.com and functionalforum.com. And he's going to be talking today about some critical hot topics on functional medical care. And we're going to be talking about, how you can really get to the root cause of your health issues using functional medicine. Please be advised that this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or health condition and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only, so please consult your healthcare practitioner before engaging in any treatment that we suggest today on the show. James, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great to be here with you. Such a pleasure. What a beautiful place.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're at my home in Malibu. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into functional medicine?
Well, I was the weird kid at school that did natural medicine. I had a chiropractor and a homeopath, and I didn't really realize that was abnormal until I got to school and no one knew what a chiropractor was. And that was my world until basically the hormones kicked in and you think your parents are insane and you sort of rebel. And my rebellious phase took me to being an investment banker. Straight out of university, I did economics, and I was on the trading floor of one of the biggest banks in the world and just sort of had a moment of clarity that I was playing for the wrong team, and that some of what I had learned growing up and just sort of part of my life might be part of the solution to what is essentially the biggest problem in the world. If you take a step back and you say, well, what is severely has the potential to hold mankind back, and chronic illness is really that. And through my economics training, I just saw that America was spending so much money, so much more than anywhere else, and not getting any increases in longevity, and actually moving down the scale in things like infant mortality. And so just sort of thought, look, if I'm going to do something with my life, let's tackle something that's important and valuable. So that was 10 years ago. Put myself right in the trenches of health creation, working with doctors and working in practices. And over the last 10 years, and particularly over the last 5 years, really started to try and think, I saw so many great results and so many patients being empowered and inspired, and sort of the ripple effects outwards of really great medicine, and just thought, how can we bring this to more people? And that's, in the last 5 years, our focus has really been on scale.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what exactly is functional medicine for any of the listeners who don't know what that is?
So functional medicine is a operating system of medicine that's very different from regular medicine. It's really designed on a few different principles. One is that systems biology. So it's understanding, instead of, the way that I like to think about it, Wendy, is that our medical system was really designed for acute disease. So it made a lot of sense in acute disease to categorize the body into geography. That's why you have an endocrinologist and a gastroenterologist and a rheumatologist. But what functional medicine focuses on is the interaction between systems. So it's got a basis in systems biology. It's got a basis in food as medicine and understanding how lifestyle factors affect health. It's got, instead of necessarily just treating the symptom as the core thing to get rid of, doctors who do functional medicine will look at a pattern of symptoms over time to determine what a root cause is. So I say, when people ask me about functional medicine, I really think the best way to think about it is root cause resolution. So looking to understand what the root cause is. Now that might be, again, in acute disease, it made a lot more sense to create a reactive system around one particular cause, whereas functional medicine is more a proactive system built around potential causes, potential triggers in the environment that I'm sure your audience has become well aware of through your work. And it's sort of like a formalization of that. And there's a lot of new science and exciting understanding of epigenetics and so forth that back up this type of strategy. But it's proving itself to be a really effective way of dealing with chronic disease. And that's why last year you saw the Cleveland Clinic, which is traditionally one of the most conservative, maybe not the most conservative, certainly the most innovative health organizations out there, build a new center for functional medicine because they saw the power of it to really to reverse chronic disease in a way that's really not possible through biochemistry drugs.
Yeah. Because so many people today, they go to their primary care physician, which is only the only care, typically covered by insurance, and they receive medications or surgery as the only resolution to essentially cover up their symptoms. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how our current healthcare system, how that's just not working?
Yeah, look, I think the system was designed for acute disease, and that's just obvious because that's what we had to deal with in the 20th century. What gets most people frustrated, I think, is that the system is not evolving quickly enough to deal with these modern epidemics. We're still taking an acute disease approach to chronic disease. So, the classic, I think the sort of the straw that's going to break the camel's back on all of this is autoimmune disease, where you see that we really understand now the causes of autoimmune disease, and it happens over a period of time, and it has a lot to do with genetic susceptibility, meeting environmental triggers, meeting leaky gut. And so you have these three things happening together. And yet, if you go to see a regular doctor for the symptoms of your autoimmune disease, you really can't reverse it, without understanding the core root cause of it. And so we're seeing people getting better from autoimmune diseases, clearing up their lab work, reducing their symptoms, the underlying function of their body coming back into play. And so that's where we see it. So I think functional medicine is sort of the operating system of a medical system that is designed to prevent and reverse chronic disease.
I completely agree with you. I've had my own personal clients reverse autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, simply by healing and sealing their gut, taking care of gut dysbiosis, and improving the overall health of their body, improving their body's systemic functioning. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you're not going to find the answers in the traditional model of care. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And people are becoming frustrated with it and are seeing it. But the good news is that there's an emerging class of physician and providers that are really getting this and understanding it. And what my role has become, and what we've been doing with the Functional Forum and otherwise, is really to accelerate this evolution of medicine. Find those providers that are ready to do this and give them a structure whereby which they can do it and deliver really high quality root cause resolution medicine to a local community, and take advantage of some of the community and technological advantages that allow this to scale out so that everyone can afford it. I mean, if it's only for the richest 1%, it's not going to be good as well. And that's one of the things that functional medicine has to overcome. And that's part of what we're trying to do, is how do we scale this out and systematize it so that it can be really available to every American and hopefully beyond.
Yeah, that's the problem. Many people that will go to a functional medical care specialist, a lot of the testing that they do, et cetera, are not covered by insurance because they're not deemed medically necessary. If a drug does not resolve the symptom, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing to try to, integrate this functional medical care and perhaps get it covered by insurance so that more people can enjoy that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's different ways that you can take it. There's a lot of people who've been working for quite a long time to sort of put functional medicine as part of the system. My own feeling about it is a little bit more Bucky Fuller, where I think you got to create a new system that makes the old system obsolete. Yes. And if you look right now in publishing, I saw this thing the other day, I'm sure your audience has seen it, the biggest purveyor of accommodation in the world, Airbnb, owns no properties. Yeah. The biggest taxi company in the world, Uber, has no cars. So you're reaching another place where whole industries are just being changed overnight. The publishing industry, books and movies and all of the media industries. And I think that's the model for health. And I think what we should really be looking at is say, look, no one else has any answers to chronic disease management. Every other organization, every other country. I grew up in the UK, and people in America think, wow, if we only had a single payer system where they just paid for everything, we'd be fine. Well, you won't be fine, because in the UK, it's the same cost. Same people are getting sick with the same chronic diseases. And instead of your business and your government sort of splitting the bill, which is what happens here, the government just pays for everything, but the government can't afford everyone's Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? And it doesn't matter who's paying the bill, it's not going to be solved. And so what I'm interested in saying is, hey, look, we've got answers here. We've been at this for a while, and medicine has made fun of this profession a lot. We're not going to integrate with you. We're going to build our own system, and I think the quality of the medicine plus the feeling of the medicine, like one of the big things about functional medicine is that it's an interactive, it's a participatory partnership between patient and practitioner, which is completely new. And if you think about the costs of retooling a whole medical system from a doctor-centric system to a patient-centric system, there's so many skills that have to be learned and so forth. I'm thinking this is what we've been looking at, is really thinking about how do we build this new model without having to take all of the cost and all of the structure across, because it's so slow. And, at the rate that chronic disease is increasing, there's going to be a tipping point where we can't afford it anymore. And so my goal is really to try and help to bring some structure to a core medical value proposition that is proving itself successful in the small test cases that it's having up until this point.
I really like what you said about it's more of a patient-centric, what functional medicine is more involved with the patients, that they have to take a much more participatory, effort in their care. Yeah. And I'm finding that as well in my own client base, they have to take a lot of personal responsibility in their own care. It's not just them taking advice from their doctor and taking a medication. They have to take a big effort on their part to improve their own health. And I think that's where we're going. I think patients have to take much more responsibility for their health and learning about their health conditions and taking supplements and more natural means to improve their health.
Yeah, look, if you want a patient-centric medical system, the patient better do something, because that's the end. I mean, look, what we're fundamentally changing is who's the hero of the story. In the old medicine, acute, it made total sense for the doctor to be the hero because they knew everything. They could be objective. And if you had an infection or if you got hit by a bus or otherwise, you don't want to be in charge. You don't want a patient-centric system in that system. However, when you're dealing with, chronic diseases that are majoritarily driven by the patient in terms of like the lifestyle that got them there, or the underlying dysfunction that's at their control, you have to involve the patient. So the future of medicine in chronic disease management, I feel, is not something that's going to be done to you. Yeah. It's going to be something that you participate in. But people like that. People like that a lot more. They like being empowered. They like to be part of it. Initially, it's a bit of a shock because we've been pretty lazy as far as like what we had to do. But now once you get over that, it's actually a really empowering proposition, because if you really, 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 really want to live to 110, you probably could. You just have to do something. Yes,
you do. And knowledge is power. And that's why I created Live to 110, so that people can get all the information they need to heal their health conditions naturally through functional medicine.
You have to start now.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of these similarities between functional medicine, holistic, and integrative care?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky thing because it's had different words over different times, and words have been sort of bastardized as well. Like, I love holism. The word holism, to me, that just perfectly explains this. But if you use the word holistic in the wrong way, people have all kinds of ideas of what that means. To me, holism is, is just understanding the synergy between systems. Sort of what I was, saying before there, where you're looking at how different systems interact and, looking at the whole picture, the whole person. And so I think it's a good terminology, but I think, it has its own baggage to deal with as far as what the name has meant. Integrative just means integrating different modalities. So you could have a, Western psychiatrist with a meditation teacher, and that would be integrative. Whether or not that would be holistic or functional medicine would not be. Functional medicine is it's a brand in a certain way, where those are sort of just words. And functional medicine refers to a very specific way of taking patients through a system. And so I think functional medicine in its own way has brought a sort of a legitimacy and a scientific understanding or a scientific basis by which to actually deliver this kind of medicine that I don't think holistic had before. Yeah. And so that's why we called our thing the functional forum and not the, integrative forum, really because we just see how much momentum this functional medicine movement has right now and how well positioned it is to continue that momentum.
Where can people find a functional medicine doctor like this?
So if you're really interested in functional medicine, you can go to, the Institute for Functional Medicine is what they train doctors. So that's functionalmedicine.org. At the moment, our focus with our business is really looking to work with those doctors and sort of make it easy for doctors to switch across and do functional medicine. You can go to my site, reviveprimarycare.com, and there we have a practitioner finder on there. But there's quite a few different ways to do it. I think in different naturopathic doctors actually, deliver, medicine very differently. Some, do a lot more scientific functional medicine. Some do a little less. And so there's a sort of a bandwidth there. But I know a ton of very, very conscientious, very, very successful naturopathic doctors who get great results as well. And if you ask a naturopath, they'll sort of tell you that functional medicine is sort of just their medicine, just souped up a bit. And so I think, naturopathic.org, you can find a naturopathic provider. But I think in all of those cases, there are things that they're going to have in common: looking for the root cause, engagement with the patient, food as medicine, really going aggressively after lifestyle and looking to work at that root cause level.
Yeah. I was actually kind of amused when I first went to a naturopathic doctor and received supplements instead of medication.
Yep.
I was very, very happy about that because I actually didn't know the doctor that I was going to was a naturopath at that time, and I was very, very thrilled.
Yeah, well, you're certainly, seeing that starting to happen as well. And I think in the next few years, what you'll start to see is you start to see that it will actually be more a part of medicine. And, what's really exciting about this, what's happening in sort of the grander picture as well. There's a lot of things that I feel are sort of happening to propel this thing forward. And one of the things is this value-based payments with Obamacare. So they're moving to a system, they say by 2018, 90% plus of payments will be based on value. And so I think that's if you do want to stay inside the insurance model, I think that most providers who are delivering this kind of care, the value proposition is actually very, very strong and the results are very strong. And I think by a combination of tracking outcomes and systematizing what's really working, again, we'll be in a really, really strong position. And that's why I don't want to just spend my time trying to get functional medicine into a system that is really not designed for. I mean, even the fee for service model, doesn't really, it's not an environment where patients do their best work because, everyone knows how to interact with a lawyer, right? You only use a lawyer for as little amount of time as you can because you know that you're on the clock. Mm-hmm. If you have that relationship with a doctor, are you fostering the best type of relationship where God, if I have to go in, it's going to be another couple $100 and then, this on top and, you're potentially just, putting money and your health at odds with each other. Yeah. And so that's why we've been really keen to communicate other business models for doctors where they can have, say, a membership or other types of ways in which, okay, I'm a member now. I know where I get my value from and I don't think about money anymore. Now let's really just get focused on keeping me healthy. And so that's some of the underlying structure that I think needs to change. But I think there's a ton of things that are happening. The digital health revolution, which by the way, by the time everyone's got an Apple Watch, they're going to want functional medicine because that's the only medicine that improves the numbers on the watch. Yeah. Everything else, the doctors are trained in putting out fires. I would hope that we would get to a point where before the fire, the watch, and then you're dealing with things upstream. So that's, there's a lot of things that I feel are sort of playing towards this becoming the standard of care for primary care. And I hope that I'll be able to sort of make some serious impact on this in the next 20 years.
So with all that how is community being brought into the medical system? How can that be done? Yeah, so
this has really got me thinking recently when I had an opportunity to do a TED Talk, and I was thinking about, the potential for what I felt was like the core of all of this work. And I really felt like, if you look at what makes, first of all, you got to start with where's the healthiest place in the world? Like, where do people live consistently to 100 or 110 without the same incidence of chronic disease that we have here? And what do they have in common? And so that took me to the work with the Blue Zones of Dan Buettner's work. It's really amazing. He identified a number of places in the world where people consistently live to 100. And there's actually one here in Loma Linda, California, and then in Costa Rica, and different areas around the world, Okinawa, Japan. And there's a lot of things that they have in common. They do eat a lot of plants, and they have a healthy diet, and we can talk about some other things. But the really most powerful thing that I thought was community. And if you think about medicine in the way that it is right now, there's no community, really. You see a doctor one-on-one. You don't share your medical information with everyone. It's completely private. And that's, again, probably the way that you wanted it in an acute system. But the power of community is really, really valuable in keeping people well. And particularly what I would say is this sort of peer-to-peer support. And so that's one of the things that we've been trying to think about. What's the best way to do it? But you can see it. Even brands are doing it. Just down here in Santa Monica, I was walking past Lululemon, and they have a running club that meets at, a couple times a week. And I saw a study recently that said groups of low-income people walking together in community, so 45 to 90 minutes, 3 times a week, their health results were so spectacular that if it was a drug, it would be a blockbuster drug. The reduce in blood glucose and waste and all these different factors as a result of doing it. And it was, one, because they were doing the exercise, but 2, because they were doing it together in community. So we've been thinking a lot about how can we actually get community into medicine. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest tasks and something that's going to be really, really powerful. So some of the ways that we see it right now, some of our doctors are doing functional medicine group visits, where essentially instead of seeing one patient at a time and going, from room to room, you might see 16 people with Hashimoto's thyroiditis together. And so think about it like this, like one of those people could be a patient that's come all the way through your program and can sing its praises because they've come out the other side. And then you have like social proof. 2, people want to hear from how people are dealing with these symptoms. Like, these symptoms obviously have an impact on your life. And part of your quality of life is trying to work out, how do I deal with this every day? So you have that sort of, support, and people talking about how they eat, sleeping tips, habits, other things that have helped them, people to try. People like to hear from other people with the same issues as them. But then you also have sort of the group accountability and support. So, my mother-in-law recently lost like 100 pounds. And really the only difference that she had was that she had to call someone every day and tell them what she ate. She had to be accountable to someone else. And this was, again, it was a peer-to-peer relationship. It wasn't a paid, it wasn't a coach. It was just they were accountable to each other. And so I thought there's so much power in that. There's really a lot of value in that. And so we've been looking at ways to do that. And maybe the most classic example is the Daniel Plan, which was Mark Hyman and a couple of other functional doctors working with Rick Warren at the Saddleback Church. And what Mark Hyman saw was, look, here was what looked like a 15,000 people going to the same church. But what it actually was groups of 5 to 10 people meeting. Of those 15,000, split up in groups of 5 to 10, doing Bible study a couple times a week independently. So it was like, let's see if we could use that community to empower behavior change. And if 15,000 people lost a combined 250,000 pounds and made all kinds of amazing gains with that. So again, it was free. It was valuable to everyone. The person who knew more, the person who knew less. You always want to say, if you want to learn something quickly, teach it. So they had this structure that really did it. And then the accountability and support was really powerful. So I feel like community is going to be the most important tool. And, I would just say one other thing that functional medicine does really well and is coming into its own is understanding the microbiome, and that's our internal community. That's a community too. And if you look at it through the community eyes, these germs inside that help you so much with digestion, metabolism, immunity, we have this amazing internal relationship with them. And as soon as that community goes out of whack, your health goes down the drain. And so, so there's learning lessons in our internal community that I think we should be applying to the external community. So it's quite an elegant form of medicine, and I think its time is arriving very shortly.
Yeah, I love how you're talking about that we need group support. I think that's why on Facebook, all these groups dedicated to different health conditions are so successful, and so that people can get support from each other and get tips and tricks. And that's also why I started my Mineral Power support group that's open to anyone that wants to join, so they can get all kinds of tips on their health and how to improve their health conditions.
Well, look, think about that Facebook group for a minute. You know, you've got people on there who are new. So they're getting value at no cost from all the people there. You've got, the people who have been there for a while who know a lot and want to share. So they're getting value from the fact that they feel like validated and share, they're sharing and they're adding value. And then you got someone like you who's just the person who put it together, who is probably participating in either of those two roles, but is also just facilitating it. And then you got Facebook that is just like the structure by it all works. So here's something that's valuable to everyone. Everyone is getting value from it. Facebook, you, the junior and the newbie are all getting value from it. It's all free. And I think that's just, that's the way of the future is how do we set up those structures that, that empower that kind of behavior change.
Is there any other way that you conceive of how we can revolutionize primary medical care?
I mean, there's, I think, community is a big part. I think, functional medicine is the operating system, and those two things go hand in hand. But the revolution, I think, is one other sort of, string to the bow. One other big part of it is this technological revolution. I think that it's going to happen anyway. I'll just give you an example. I was thinking this, I spoke to this lady the other day and she put something in my mind that I think when I say it to you, you'll realize the same way, is that the companies that now run our healthcare, so Aetna and Oxford and Blue Cross, right? Everyone hates them. Like they literally have like a 5 to 10%. They have the only company or the only organizations that have a worse rating than Congress is the insurance companies. Everyone hates them. But that's because you don't have a choice. There's nothing else there. So I'll tell you right now that Amazon and Google, all these big companies are working on a health product and it hasn't arrived yet. So you think when Amazon brings out a health insurance and they know from your purchasing and otherwise that you live healthy or otherwise, and so your insurance is now like $200 a month as opposed to $1,000, like you're going to see big companies that are going to come in, companies that we already trust and like, develop into the health field. And I think a lot of those old companies are just going to go away, which is none too soon, in my thought. So I think technology is going to play a huge role. And I only tell that story just because it's an interesting glimpse into the future, to a point where, a lot of businesses have made their way by having no real competition, because no one can really create the structure and systems that they have. But the digital revolution is allowing that in a really new and innovative way. So that's just one example, but I said before, the digital health revolution, the quantified self, I think will be a big driver of it. And so I don't think that anything necessarily, it may not look like a revolution. It may just look like, wow, I just have this much better care. Just like Uber sometimes looks like I've got this way better taxi. You don't think that this is a revolution in car sharing. You just think, wow, this is a lot better than it used to be. And I hope it'll be a bit more like that.
I'm really stunned to hear that Amazon's going to be getting into the health field. And I'm actually really, really excited because I love Amazon. They do everything so efficiently and deliver everything so flawlessly that it's just so natural that they would go into healthcare. I
mean, I can't say it for sure, but I was speaking on a panel with people who know a lot more than I do about it. And when they said that, I walked home thinking about it, just thinking, wow, we haven't even seen the beginning of this transformation. And, the good news is that until it happens, you can take control of your own health and play whatever role you want to do in that. But just know that some disruption is coming, and generally those kind of things work out really well for the consumer.
Can you talk a little bit about a subject that's a little bit, controversial, and what is your opinion about the government and big pharma kind of being in bed together to profit on our sickness? It
is a tricky topic. I would say 5 years ago, I was like mad and I really wanted to like rebel and, you know, do that kind of thing. But then I sort of caught this, I got that Bucky Fuller quote. You know, he said, you never change anything by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And I just thought to myself, you know, I could probably be really angry about this for a long time, but all of these things, like, for whatever reason, and however I managed to put myself in this situation, I can see that this is an operating system that solves a lot of this problem. And by being in the middle of this and making this grow, we could probably solve that problem again. So I think, look, it's ugly. I mean, it's definitely clear. I've seen, you know, films like Trace Amounts I just saw last week, which really looks at, you know, how so much mercury got into our environment and what it causes for health. And it's shocking. And the cover up of it is even more shocking. So I think, yeah, it's definitely an unholy alliance. There's definitely examples of regulatory capture where the regulators that are meant to be regulating the companies get captured by the company and sort of do the company's bidding, which, you know, is really a terrible situation. But again, I feel like sort of pleasantly optimistic that the truth will out. People are really learning about this in a way through the internet or otherwise. There's not just one mouthpiece, because the media has been really complicit in as well.
Yes.
And so, you know, the media is complicit in it. You see who owns what and how the information gets out. So it's really exciting that you can control your own media. I mean, here we are, you have your own podcast, I have my own podcast, you have your own thing, and it has the potential to scale to infinity. You know, you've seen people, activists out there like Food Babe, who are causing a real stir because they're talking about things that no one should be really talking about. And people are starting to take notice. So, you know, you can look at everything that happens day to day as either a positive or negative. About 5 years ago, I just decided I was going to be positive about it, and that, there were enough people who had a lot of the pieces and could see it, that we could work together. And just seeing, you know, what's happening in Silicon Valley, where smart people are not afraid to disrupt big industries. That has me, you know, very, very excited that, you know, the sort of, the power of the human spirit will overcome what's been holding us back. But yeah, I mean, look, the incentives work to answer your original question, the incentives work in a horrible way. You know, if people stay just sick enough to take medication, but not dead, if they stay in that position, they're extremely profitable. And I think at the end of the day, you know, if you have a profit-driven system with that system set up, there's always going to be people that take advantage of it. And I think, I think it's time for change.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree.
You can vote with your dollars too. You know, every time you vote to get your media from different sources, you know, you're seeing right now, like HBO suddenly available on Apple TV, and you don't need to have cable anymore. I got rid of TV 6 years ago, and I see that, okay, enough people do it. Then they realize, okay, there's a market here. Or if you vote third party in an election, maybe your vote doesn't mean anything that day, but it's sort of a signal to other people that, hey, look how many people did it last time. So it takes a long time sometimes for these things to work out, but anything you buy, anything you do is a signal for the rest of the system. That's the market system. And so by living your truth and making the decisions that you want to make based on what you really think is you'd like to see in the world, does create change to whatever degree you do it.
Let's talk a little bit about, you know, how you're personally creating change with the Evolution of Medicine Summit. You held that last year and you're holding it again in September, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our first year was really just to set a foundation of the ways in which we saw that medicine was evolving, however slowly or fast. So, the movement from doctor to patient centric, the movement towards food as medicine from food as fuel, technology coming into medicine, the understanding of the microbiome, the understanding of the mind-body connection. That's what we focused on in the first year, was really laying out the foundation of this shift. So we had a patient track and we had a doctor track. So patients, it was, it's all free and available online. And so patients could listen to the things that were really designed for them on how to keep themselves and their family healthy, and what were some structures that really created change, like the power of family, the power of community, that kind of thing. And then we had training for doctors. So be like, okay, this is a day of like, we chose to focus on the gut, the brain gut connection, just because the week that we were doing our event was the first journal of that came out as a medical journal. So, and then also speaking to doctors about the sort of practical aspects of delivering this kind of care. So it really set a solid footprint for who we are and what we do. And I was really glad for it. We had an amazing response. It was great to get so much feedback from all across the world. We got onto the Huffington Post for 5 days. We did a whole 5 days of segments with them. That was really fun too. So I think people sort of, it was a lot of fun to do. And I'm really proud of the people that we had come to speak. This year we're doing it again in September. And the focus this year is going to be on healthcare from scratch. When I did my TED talk back in April, it was actually March, I did it at this little island called Guernsey. And Guernsey is a tiny island between England and France. It's got the smallest amount of bureaucracy of any, it's not in the EU, it's not in the UK. And the guy who organized it was like, you know what? If ever there was going to be a sort of a petri dish where you could do something completely new with 65,000 people, which is, the size of a small town, and here you have an island where you could sort of maybe get venture capital to pay for a new medical system to be built without asking for permission. What would you do? What would be the building blocks of a new medical system? And that's really what I want to focus on for this year is what are the building blocks? And I think that, we're going to focus on people that have a really strong message as far as like what a building block of the new medical system would look like, but also those who have been able to scale up their message, to a lot of people, because there's a lot of doctors that have a crazy amount of information. Like, I've met so many brilliant doctors, but there's a real art to communicating that in a way that really scales out to a lot of people. And so that's what we're really focused on for this year. And then who knows next year, but I really think that it's an interesting conversation to have. What would you do if you could start from scratch? Because most of us are really just stuck in the mindset of how do we evolve this behemoth that is really not designed for what we need, and how do we like chip away at the edges to try and make it a little bit better. But the truth is that as technology just increases, the distance between what we're doing and what we're capable of just keeps growing. And so what I'd like to do is like, how can we just get over there and start over there rather than like having to just move this thing across. So that's the conversation I want to engage this year, because I think there's a lot of people who are interested in it, ready for it, and want to be part of it as well. That's the cool thing, is that this medicine is participatory by anyone who's watching this, making better decisions in the supermarket or otherwise. You're participating in it. When I first moved to Georgia, the first place I moved when I moved to America was Georgia. Not even Atlanta, rural Georgia, right? So there was a supermarket. And the food there was, there was no natural food. There was, it was all just, it was no good. Now, 10 years later, I go back and that place is completely different. There's a huge organic section. There's all kinds of healthy recipes, half the store basically. And I've like, wow, in 10 years that just happened because people were making different choices. Imagine the impact as this accelerates forward. And that's what I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see doctors changing from providing traditional medical care and moving towards functional medicine, because we need so many more medical, functional medicine doctors and integrative practitioners. Can you talk a little bit about how someone can transition, a physician can transition from primary traditional medical care to functional medicine? Absolutely.
Well, we're looking to be that transition agent. So if you come to, Functional Forum and you sign up, we have evolution in medicine concierges who can help to really understand your unique position and put you in touch with some tools. Obviously, there's a couple of things. One is the clinical side of things. So you have to learn a new operating system. And in a certain way, it's a tricky proposition because you have to unlearn quite a little bit to be able to do this. You have to unlearn a little bit. And those doctors that have done it, they've had to unlearn quite a lot. But you also see that nurse practitioners, naturopathic doctors, physician's assistants, osteopaths, certain chiropractors, these in certain cases have to unlearn a little bit less. And so, there's a lot of nurse practitioners that are stepping up to deliver it as well. So the clinical part is one part, but then what I think is and there are organizations already that do that really well. The IFM, Functional Nutrition 101. There are other organizations that are really designed to make it easy for doctors to understand functional medicine from that point of view. And I think IFM is certainly the leader, and, other groups coming along there.
And that's Dr. Mark Hyman's.
Yeah, I mean, he's the chairman of it, but it's been around since 1991. And it's got a really foolproof system for giving people the structure of how to understand it. But there are a lot of doctors that have taken that training and still aren't doing functional medicine because it's difficult to do it in private practice. And what you've actually seen in medicine in the last few years is an opposite move where people are moving into working for hospitals because it's really hard to make it in private practice. Yeah. So what we're focused on at the Evolution of Medicine is the non-clinical aspects of how to run a successful, what we call micro practice. And the reason why we say micro practice is it's low overhead. And one of the things that I hear from doctors is that they feel like there's no way they can quit their job because they have a life and a family and everything, quit their job at X $100,000 per year that they get in the hospital system and then just switch over and have this micro practice waiting for people to come in. But with the micro practice, that's often the transition for most practitioners. You just don't see that. You see the big functional medicine practice and you say, wow, like I couldn't have this. Look at the overhead. Look how many people are working here. But what you didn't see is 5 years ago, they just had one office in another practice's office. And they were just doing their thing there. And they built up, patients and then, team. And it was just this build that came to that. So what we want to do is really make it easy to build that micro practice because one, this medicine is not technologically advanced. Like it's really a lot of just me and you talking. Yeah. And so you don't need a lot of structure for that. I mean, even telemedicine is stepping up where you can see a doctor on your phone. And I think that's really exciting too, because again, think of all the structure. When I say the infrastructure that needs to be evolved, think of like hospitals and buildings and all of these things that you're going to have to retool them for chronic disease management. You don't need as much stuff. You don't need as many things for this. You just need a human connection. You need empathy. You need, an understanding of the different role. The patient understands their role. The doctor has a slightly different role because they need to be empowering people, which is not a skill set of doctors, but coaching is something that's come from business that really fits nicely into that and really, creates behavior change in a way that the medical profession has never really had to do. So, so what we're focused on is really helping doctors understand that non-clinical transition. What are the technologies? What are the structures that really would make it easy for you to start this one Saturday a month? Get a few patients, get some experience, then go to 2 days a week, then, move into that. And eventually you can have that practice that you want where you can, not have the same. That's what the other thing is. I speak to so many doctors. They're so stressed. Yeah. They can't live. They're telling their doctors, we got to reduce your stress. Meanwhile, they've still got 15 more patients and it's 4:00 and they still haven't done their charts and their kids from school, all of this. And the most horrific example of that is the level of physician suicides, which is terrible. And it's a real travesty. And you're seeing it now younger and younger with students. And so what we want to do is really create a sort of a structure, not a franchise because you can't really do that in medicine, but a structure whereby which a doctor could be able to come in, do this type of medicine, have a healthy relationship with their life and their family. And, that's what I hope that we can do.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable because I think a lot of doctors go through medical training and they're not taught how to create a practice, how to run a business. And that's very much a part of being a practitioner, to be a successful practitioner. And I think that many functional medicine doctors and even people like myself, who is an FDN, a functional diagnostic nutritionist, are kind of becoming the Netflix of film, where they put Blockbuster out of business, this bricks and mortars type way of doing things, and into the digital era where you can see someone. I have clients all over the world and there isn't any need to see someone face to face. I can see them, over Skype or what have you, or even on my phone. Yeah. And you can treat them and, give them advice that way. I think it's such a better model because people have, much more power in who they choose as their health practitioner. They don't have to be in their small town in Georgia and pick, the one doctor in that town. I think it's so empowering for patients and so far reaching for health practitioners and physicians to be able to practice medicine in that way.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the exciting part of it is that, there is that potential. And, think about the words, like what really got into my mind was the two words, primary and care, right? What does that come to mean? It's come to mean like a 7-minute visit with a doctor who literally has 2 tools at his disposal, or 3. I mean, surgery, he's not going to do it. Primary care, he's going to refer. So referral into a specialist or some sort of drug therapy there. That's like literally the only 2 options they have. And I'd like to tell your listeners, and this is something that I didn't really plan on sort of telling everyone a little down the road, but I'll give you a preview, is that when your primary care doctor makes a referral to a specialist, you have no idea why they're making that referral, because what's happening now is more and more doctors, as they form part of a hospital system, they then get told, okay, now you're an employee. You need to send more people to the rheumatologist. You need to send more people to the psychiatrist. You need to send more people there. So then the doctor is under pressure to say, look, you've only sent 5 people to the psychiatrist this month. This person's coming in with some anxiety. It's probably a good idea for you to send them on. Like, that is happening. I've spoken to doctors. I know that's happening, and it's disgusting. Yeah. And if patients knew that was happening, they would lose all faith in the primary care system, which I hope will happen. Yeah. But only once we have enough practitioners like yourself who can provide real primary care. Primary. What's primary? What comes first? Primary prevention starts with the patients, not involved with the doctor at all. It's the doctors, like, I hope that what we see as medicine now will be this acute care system that hopefully we never have to engage with, right? And if you get hit by a truck or otherwise, you need that system. It's really good at doing what it does, but it's in context. It shouldn't be part of primary prevention. It shouldn't be part of chronic disease management, really, generally. So I think that primary is, that should be more primary, and having a relationship with someone on your phone or otherwise where you can, get them right now and they know who you are and you have a good relationship. I think that's good. And then care, the care of someone else, the empathy to ask the right questions, to really uncover, the triggers or the environmental issues that may be driving your health condition right now, or the relationships or whatever that might be. But then also care, primary care, like taking care of yourself to a certain degree with what you were saying earlier, really taking responsibility that care can't fall on anyone else. Like, it really has to fall on you. There's not enough, unless you have 3 minders who are like feeding you and exercising you and otherwise, which is insane. It's never going to happen. You need to take that primary care yourself. So I think reclaiming primary care is a big part. That's why I called our initial business Revive Primary Care, because I was like, that needs reviving. And maybe we'll come back to, to that part. But at the moment, we're just hyper focused on making sure that the doctors can deliver this kind of medicine, because you have to make sure that the demand and supply doesn't get too out of whack. 'Cause otherwise, it won't be sustainable.
The same thing that you talked about with doctors sending out referrals because they're under pressure too, the same thing is happening with Big Pharma as well, where doctors earn rewards for writing a certain number of prescriptions. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how doctors win trips for writing X number of prescriptions, et cetera?
I mean, it's been so obvious. John Oliver did an awesome expose of it a few weeks ago on his show that was amazing and just really got to the heart of it. You don't know, you don't know what those incentives are behind it. You can be sure that the pharmaceutical companies have all the data so they can know where to massage and where the leverage is. Now, some of the most like ridiculously obvious things have been taken away. So you can't like literally just give doctors money in the way that you might have been able to do in the past. And now it has to be a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, it's an ugly business. And so I would just say, the thing that I would say is that the majority of people like yourself who are delivering this kind of care, they're not doing it because they're doing it because they see that they wanted to help people. And that I feel what this industry has at this very moment, that it may not have forever as it becomes bigger, is that the vast majority of the people that I've met who are in it really care. and really want to do the right thing and have got into doing this because they love what they do and they want to help people. And so I think that finding the provider with the right intentions is probably your best bet. And that could be a functional MD. It could be a regular MD. There's a lot of regular MDs who aren't doing functional medicine who really care and do deliver great care. But I also feel like, the other providers that deliver this type of medicine, is a better choice. Like for my daughter's health too, we have a chiropractor that we really like, and she's very well versed in functional medicine. Now, if there's an emergency, I know where to go for emergency medicine, but I don't interact my child with emergency medicine unless it's an emergency.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I'm very lucky that I'm, able to care for my daughter for the most part, because I don't want to lend out her care to anyone else, and definitely not going to give her medications or anything like that. So it's wonderful to have a functional medicine practitioner like a chiropractor on your side, on your team.
And that's been a building trust over a period of time. I know her, I trust her. I've spent time with her, and there's just a really good, solid foundation of that relationship. So, that's really important to me.
Well, I have a question that I like to ask all of my guests on the podcast.
Okay.
What, in your opinion, is the most pressing health issue in the world today?
It's come back to what we started with. It's definitely chronic disease. It's definitely, like, the World Economic Forum says it. They say, what is the biggest thing that's holding humanity back? Chronic disease. I grew up in South Africa, and people think Africa, and they think, oh, these, have acute diseases. And I think a lot of people who have never been outside of America think that, okay, in the rest of the world, people are still having dysentery, and here we don't. But, in Africa, the biggest problems are the non-communicable diseases, the chronic diseases everywhere. When Mark Hyman went to Haiti, he tells the story of going there after the hurricane. And he was like, what's the number one diagnosis of people coming in thinking it was going to be diphtheria or something like that? No, it was diabetes. Yeah. And so, this is the biggest pressing issue, and we have to work it out. So I feel like chronic disease in all of its forms is the most pressing issue. And, that's why I'm really just super focused on getting this right.
Yeah, and the primary medical system of care really doesn't do a good job with managing chronic diseases. It's just managed with medication.
Yeah, no, that's it. Most chronic diseases don't have a single event that led to it, and so medicine designed on a single event, like an infection or trauma or otherwise, is inappropriate. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's been great to be here with you, and thanks for all your great work. And, we'll all put our heads together on how to get to 110.
Yeah, exactly. Well, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about where they can find you, and a little bit more about your future plans, et cetera?
Yeah. So, you can go to, if you're a patient looking for that, you can go to reviveprimarycare.com. And on there, if you sign up, we have what we've identified as sort of maybe the 4 major causes of chronic disease that are sort of under your control, and to do that. If you're a provider or if you know doctors, I would go to functionalforum.com. It's a monthly show. It's the first Monday of the month. And, if you watch the show, we've got all of the archives on our YouTube channel. That hopefully is a place where a doctor could be introduced to some of these concepts. And once they start, introduced to some of these concepts, they'll want to know, okay, what do I do next? And we'll be able to, give them those structure. So functionalforum.com or reviveprimarycare.com are the best places. And then September 21st to 28th, we'll have evolutionofmedicinesummit.com. And, that's going to be fun too.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. I helped to promote the last event, and I thought it was a wonderful event. And
thank you.
I was very, very impressed with what you put together in the lineup of doctors. It was just fantastic. So I definitely recommend it to anyone that definitely sign up next year. If you're on the newsletter, you'll be hearing about it as well, for sure.
Thanks so much, Wendy. It's been great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it. And listeners, if you want to learn more about how to heal your health conditions naturally, you can tune to live to110.com, learn all about detox and healthy diet, modern paleo diet. And again, thank you so much for listening to the Live to 110 podcast. Listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to found the summit that you had me on.
Okay, so I am a physique competitor. So stay competition ready. When people hear competition and they see the promos for it, they see a physique competitor. So they might think that it's all about fitness competition, but it's not just that. I do physique competitions, yes. But the whole purpose behind it is that when I started jumping in and doing physique shows, the first show I did, a lot of people do like this 12-week exhausting prep, they call it, for their shows. I had a friend that was doing a show, and we were actually texting. I'll just say this: we were texting pictures of each other back and forth with no shirt on, and because he was kind of showing me where he was coming into this show. And I looked at that and I thought, well, I'm going to send him one of me. And he says, why don't you jump in the show? So I signed up for my first show, and I was 4 days out. I signed up for a Saturday show on a Wednesday. And so I showed up, and I've never been a big guy, so I got to try to win with conditioning. And so when I showed up, everybody was backstage. They're like, oh, I can't wait to eat pizza again. I can't wait to do all these things. Oh, my gosh. And they're like, man, you're shredded. You just do tons of cardio. What do you do to get that lean? And my friend was standing there with me. He goes, this guy's that lean all year round. I'm like, oh, I hate you. Do you just do tons of cardio? I'm like, no, I do no cardio. And so at that point in time, I started kind of formulating in my mind that there's a lot of people doing things wrong in the fitness competition arena. And I really felt like as I kept doing show after show, I went on to win. And I'm natural, and if anyone is familiar with the NPC, it's a non-tested organization, and I took first place at the Missouri Championships in 2013. I went on to get my pro card in the IFPA, which is the pro affiliate to the NANBF. I'm completely natural, and you're not really supposed to be able to compete that well as a natural guy in the NPC. There are people that do it, but my point being is I felt like this burning desire to get out the way that I eat and the way that I train and start getting some people to where they're not in such a miserable state when it comes to preparing for a competition. And so as I kind of refined how I do this, there's been a lot more research that's come out to kind of support what I've been doing for years when people say, oh, that's the wrong way. So stay competition ready. And then our tagline is kind of this: fitness experts share how to have abs year-round while eating what you love and never counting calories. Because that's what I do. I do eat foods that I love. I do not count calories. I went through a phase where I broke everything down and I learned how to do it. You've been doing this a long time, Wendy, as far as being a functional diagnostic nutritionist. So I know that you can look at a menu. I know that you can look at your plate and get a pretty good macro breakdown kind of in your head